Good morning, sunshines. We started Ella Enchanted, so if you didn't hear the first chapter, make sure you go do that. What we know so far about Ella is that she has a curse, although it was supposed to be a gift, the gift of obedience. And that means that whoever gives her a command could be easy as sit down, or you have to do 25-mile run. She has to do no options, which obviously we've found out so far with her friend in the first chapter was not great, because people can take advantage. So her mother has told her that she's never to tell anyone ever again, so that doesn't happen. She doesn't get taken advantage of, but unfortunately her mother just passed away, and so that's where we left off. Chapter 2. Leaving behind a grieving husband and child, we must comfort them, the High Chancellor Thomas wound down after drowning on for almost an hour. Some of his speech had been about mother. At least the words Lady Eleanor were spoken often. But the person they described, dutiful parent, loyal citizen, steadful spouse, sounded more like the High Chancellor than like my mother. Part of the speech had been about dying, but more was about grieving allegiance to Curia and its rulers, King Gerald, Prince Shermont, and the entire royal family. Father reached for my hand. His palms were moist and hot as a hydra's swamp. I wished I had been allowed to stand with Mandy and the other servants. I pulled out his grasp and moved a step away. He closed the distance between us and shook my hand again. Mother's casket was made of gleaming mahogany carved with designs of fairies and elves. If only the fairies could have leapt out of the woods and cast a spell to bring her back to life. And another one to send Father away. Or maybe my fairy godmother would do it, if I knew her or where to find her. When the High Chancellor finished, it was my task to close the casket so Mother would be lowered into the grave. Father put his hand on my shoulder and pushed me forward. Mother's mouth was stern, the opposite of its look in life. And her face was empty, which was awful. But worse than that was the creak of the coffin lid that went down with a dry click when it closed, and the thought of Mother packed away in the box forever. The tears I had swallowed all day erupted now. I stood there before the whole court crying in an infant's endless wail, unable to stop myself. Father pressed my face into his chest. Perhaps he appeared to be comforting me, but he was only trying to muffle my noise, which couldn't be muffled. My grief was too strong. He let me go. In a sharp whisper, he said, "Get away from here. Come back when you can be quieter." For once, I was glad to obey. I ran. My heavy black gown tripped me, and I fell. Before anyone could help me up, I was off again, my knee and hand stinging. The bigger tree in the graveyard was a weeping willow, a crying tree. I plunged through its leaves and threw myself down sobbing. Everyone called it losing Mother. But she wasn't lost. She was gone. And no matter where I went, another town, another country, fairyland, a gnome's cavern, I would never find her. We'd never talk again or laugh together or swim in a river or slide down a banister, or play tricks on Bertha, or a million things that we used to do. I cried myself out and sat up. My gown had changed in front from black silk to dirt brown. As Mandy would have said, it was a spectacle. How much time had gone by? I had to go back. Father had told me to, and the curse was tugging at me to obey. Outside the privacy of my tree, Prince Shermont stood, reading a tombstone. I had never been so near him before. Had he heard me cry? Although the prince was only 2 years older than I, he was much taller, and he stood just like his father, feet apart, hands behind his back, and though the whole country was passing by on review, he looked just like his father, too. Almost the sharp angles of King Gerald's face were softened in his son. They each had taunt curls and beautiful skin. I had never been near enough to the king to know whether he had also had sparkling freckles across his nose. Surprisingly, on each of surprisingly on such a dark face. Cousin of mine, the prince said, gesturing at the tombstone. Never liked him much, but I liked your mother, he said, walking back towards the tomb. Did he expect me to come with him? Was I supposed to maintain a suitable distance from his royal self? With enough room for the carriage to pass between us, I walked at his side. He moved closer. I saw he had been crying too, although he had stayed upright and clean. You can call me Shar, he told me suddenly. Everyone does. I could? We walked in silence. My father calls me Shar too, he said. The king? Thank you, I said. Thank you, Shar, he corrected. Then, your mother used to make me laugh. Once at a banquet, Chancellor Thomas was making a speech. While he talked, your mother moved her napkin around. I saw it before your father crumpled it up. She had arranged it on the edge in the shape of the Chancellor's profile, with the mouth open and the chin struck. It would have looked exactly like him, if he were the color of a blue napkin. I had to leave without dinner so I could get outside and laugh. So basically, at some dinner, he had seen her trying to make fun of the Chancellor, and then the father said nope. But he appreciated it. We were halfway back and it started to rain. I could only make out one small figure. Standing by my mother's grave. It was my father. Where did everyone go? I asked Shar. They all left before I came to find you, he said. Did you want to wait? Did you want them to wait? He sounded worried, as if perhaps he should have made them stay. No, I didn't want anyone to wait, I answered. Meaning father could have gone too, and I would have been very happy about that. I know all about you, Shar announced after we had taken a few steps more. You do? How could you? Our cook met at the market. She talks about you. She looked sideways at me. Do you know much about me? No. Mandy had never said a thing. What do you know? I know that you can imitate people just like Lady Eleanor could. Once you imitated your manservant to his face, and he wasn't sure whether he was the servant or you were. You made up your own fairy tales, and you dropped things and tripped over things. I know you once broke a whole set of dishes. I slipped on ice, I defended. Ice chips you spilled before you slipped on them, he laughed. It wasn't a ridiculing laugh. It was a happy laugh at a good joke. An accident, I protested. But I smiled too, trembling, after so much crying. We reached father, who bowed. Thank you, your highness, for accompanying my daughter back. Shar returned the bow. Come on, Eleanor, father said. Eleanor. No one ever called me that before. Even though it was my real name, Eleanor had always been my mother, and always would be. Ella. I'm Ella, I said. Ella, then. Come, Ella. He bowed to the Prince Charmant and climbed into the carriage. I had to go. Shar handed me in. I didn't know whether to give him my hand or let him push it. I didn't know whether to give him my hand or to let him push up on my elbow. He would have come up in the middle of my arm, and I had to grasp the side of the carriage with the other for balance. When he closed the door, I caught my skirt, and there was a loud ripping sound, and father winced disapprovingly. I saw Shar through the window, laughing again. I turned my skirt and found a gash about 6 inches above the hem. Bertha would never be able to make it smooth again. I arranged myself far from father as possible. He was staring out the window. A fine affair. All of Frel came, everyone who counts anyway, he said, as though mother's funeral had been a wonderful ball. It wasn't fine, it was awful, I said. How could mother's funeral be fine? The prince was very friendly to you. He liked mother. Your mother was very beautiful. His voice was regretful. I'm sorry she's dead. Nathan flicked his whip, and the carriage began to move. Chapter 3. I'm going to read a little bit more because it's a short chapter. I also want you to notice And remember that the dad doesn't know about her curse. So when he ordered her to go cry away, she just did. And this seems like it's written a little bit long ago, so just remember that. Okay, chapter 3. When we reached the house, Father ordered me to change into something clean and to hurry down to greet the guests who were arriving to pay their respects. My room was peaceful, everything just as it had been before Mom died. The birds embroidered into the covers on my bed were safe with their world of cross stitches and leaves. My diary was on the dresser, the friends of my childhood, Flora, the rag doll, and the wooden doll in the gown with the wooden doll in the gown with 7 flounces nestled in the basket. All of my friends were where they were, so clearly all her friends were dolls, which is kind of sad. I sat on the bed, fighting my need to obey Father's orders to change and go back downstairs, although I'd wanted to draw comfort from my room, from my bed, from the light breeze coming through the window. I kept thinking instead of Father and getting dressed. Once I overheard Bertha tell Mandy that he was the only person outside and that his insides were ashes mixed with coins and a brain. But Mandy had disagreed. He's human enough, through and through. No other creature would be as selfish as he is. Not fairies or gnomes or elves or even giants. So basically they're saying he's not a nice person. For a full 3 minutes, I delayed getting dressed. It was a terrible game I played, trying to break my curse, seeing how long I could last against the need to do what I'd been told. There was a buzzing in my ears, and the floor seemed to tilt so far that I feared I would slide right off the bed. I hugged my pillow until my arms hurt, as if the pillow were an anchor against the following orders. Everything in my body screamed at me that I needed to do it. In a second, I was going to fly apart into 1,000 pieces. I stood and walked to my wardrobe. Immediately, I felt perfectly fine again as I changed. Although I suspected Father wanted me to wear another morning gown, I put on a frock Mother liked best. She said the spicy green brought out my eyes. I thought I looked like a grasshopper in it, a skinny, spiky grasshopper with human head and striped hair. But at least the gown wasn't black. She hated black clothing more than anything else in the world. The great hall was full of people in black. Father came to me instantly. "Here's my lass, my young Eleanor, my daughter," he said loudly. He led me in, whispering, "You look like a weed that's grown too long. You're supposed to be in mourning. They'll think you have no respect for your mother." I was engulfed from behind by 2 chubby arms encased in rustling black stains. "My poor child, we feel for you. The voice was syrupy. "And Sir Peter, it's dreadful to see you on such a tragic occasion." An extra tight squeeze and I was released. The speaker was a tall, plump lady with long, wavy, honey-colored terraces. Her face was a pasty white with twin spots of rouge on her cheeks. So she had a lot of blush on her cheeks. So she was really pale and had a lot of blush. So just imagine her kind of funny looking. With her were 2 smaller versions of herself, but without the rouge or the blush. The younger ones also lacked her mother's abundant hair. Instead, she had thin curls struck tight in her scalp, as though it was glued there. "This is Dame Olga," Father said, reaching out his arm to her. I curtsied and knocked into the young girl. "Beg your pardon," I said. She didn't answer, didn't move, only watched me. Father continued, "And are these lovely daughters yours?" "They are my treasures. This is Hattie, and this is Olive. They are off to finishing school in a few days. Hattie is older than I, but about 2 years. Delightful to meet your acquaintance," she said, smiling, showing her large front teeth. She had held her hand out to me as though she expected me to kiss it or bow. I stared, uncertain what to do, and she lowered her arm, but continued to smile. Olive was the one I bumped into. "I'm glad to meet you," she said, her voice just a little too loud. She was about my age, The frows of her frown were prominently etched between her eyes. So like when I focus and I go like that, that's kind of what she looks like all the time. So try it. It looks kind of funny. Comfort Eleanor in her grief, Dame Olga told her daughters. I want to talk to Sir Peter alone. She took Father's arm and left us. Our hearts weep for you, Hattie began. When you bellowed at the funeral, I thought, what a poor thing you are. My heart just ached. How a girl could cry so hard, I just don't know. Green isn't the color of mourning, Olive said. Hattie surveyed the room. This is a fine hall, almost as fine as the palace, where I'm going to live someday. Our mother, Dame Olga, said your father is very rich and has lots of money. She says he can make money out of anything, even out of a toenail, Olive suggested. Our mother, Dame Olga, says that your father was poor when he married your mother. Our mother says Lady Eleanor was rich when they got married, but your father made her even richer. We're rich too, Olive said. We're lucky to be rich. So now you can notice what's important to these girls, and I have a feeling that it's not going to do any good, that they just like money a lot. Would you show us the rest of your house? Hattie asked. We went upstairs, and Hattie had to look at everywhere. She opened the wardrobe in Mother's room, and before I could stop her, ran her hands over Mother's gowns. When we got back to the hall, she announced, 42 windows and a fireplace in every room. The window must have cost a trunkload of gold. Do you want to know about our house? Olive asked. I don't care if they lived in a hollowed log, Ella thought to herself. You'll have to visit us sometimes and see it for yourself, Hattie said in response to my silence. We stood near the table, which was loaded with mountains of food, from a whole roasted pig with ivy thread through it, and buttered cookies as small and lacy as snowflakes. I wonder how Mandy had time to cook it all. Maybe she was up all night long preparing. Would you like something to eat? Yeah, Olive began, but her sister interrupted her firmly. Oh, no, thank you. We never eat at parties. The excitement quite takes away from our appetites. My appetite, Olive tried again. Our appetites are small, Mother worries. But it looks delicious. Hattie edged towards the food. Quail eggs are such a delicacy. Wow, what a wonderful spread you have. My guess is that their mother doesn't like them to eat a lot. That's just what I found from that. I like gooseberry tarts, Olive said. We mustn't, Hattie said. Well, maybe just a little. A giant couldn't even eat half of a leg of a deer, plus a huge mound of wild rice, and 8 of the 50 quail eggs, and go back for dessert. But Hattie could. Hattie could eat more than Ella had ever seen anyone eat in her entire life. She found it quite disgusting. Olive ate even more than Hattie. Gooseberry tarts and currant bread and cream and pudding and chocolate and spice cakes, all drizzled over with butter rum sauce and an apricot sauce and peppermint sauce. They just never stopped eating. They brought their plates closer to the face so that the fork had short distance as possible to travel. Olive ate steadily, but Hattie put her fork down every so often to pat her mouth daintily with a napkin. Then she'd tuck again in, and avidly as ever she'd shove food into her mouth. It was disgusting to watch. I looked down at the throw rug that used to lie under Mother's chair. Today it had been removed near the food. I had never concentrated on it before. A hound of hunters chased a boar towards the fringe of the scarlet wool that had been etched into the rug. It was quite beautiful. As I stared for a moment, I saw it move right before my eyes. I didn't quite believe it. The dog had just barked, and I felt his throat relax. One of the hunters limped, and I felt a cramp inside its calf. The boar gasped for air and ran on fear and rage. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was moving right before my eyes. What are you looking at? Olive asked. She had finished eating. I stared. I felt as if I had been in the rug. Nothing, just the carpet. I glanced at the rug again. Ordinary carpet with ordinary designs. It wasn't even moving when I looked at it again. Your eyes were popping out. They looked like an org's eye, Hattie said. Buggy. Whew. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop today because someone's here.